Rome burned. Flame swallowed homes, temples, and lives. The sky turned red with smoke, and the streets filled with screams. But in the heart of the chaos, Emperor Nero stood calmly in his palace. He played his lyre as fire lit the night sky. Some said he set the fire. Others believed he just watched it spread. No one truly knew. But one thing was clear, he felt no guilt. The city suffered, and Nero made music. But the fire outside was not the only fire inside Nero. His heart was still burning with the memory of Poppaea Sabina, his wife, his empress, his obsession. She was dead. Some said he kicked her while she was pregnant. Some claimed it was a moment of rage. But all knew the truth he never admitted. Nero killed the woman he claimed to love more than life itself. He walked alone through marble halls, touching her old dresses, smelling the perfumes she left behind. He searched her face in every mirror and dreamed of her every night. His mind grew darker. His grief twisted into obsession. Nero didn't want to move on. He wanted her back. And in his world, ruled by power and fantasy, death did not mean the end. One day, he heard of a young boy, beautiful, delicate, quiet. A servant with soft skin and eyes like Poppaea. Nero demanded to see him. When the boy was brought forward, Nero didn't see a child. He saw a ghost, a second chance, a new Poppaea. "This is her," Nero whispered. "She has returned." The boy said nothing. His fate was sealed in silence. Nero smiled. He would make the boy into his empress. A body reshaped by command. A soul trapped in a love that never truly lived. Rome had seen fire. Now it would witness madness. He was no one. A slave boy from the provinces. No name that mattered, no future to speak of. But now, all eyes in the palace turned to him. Sporus. That's what they called him. Thin, pale, with long lashes and soft features. He was young, too young to understand the danger of beauty in the presence of a grieving emperor. Nero watched him in silence. He didn't ask the boy's name. He didn't care. What he saw wasn't a servant. He saw Poppaea, his dead empress, returned in a different form. The boy's eyes were wide, like hers. His mouth, small and soft. It was enough. That night, Nero gave the order. The court obeyed without question. No one told the boy what was coming. The next morning, he was taken from his quarters, washed, perfumed, and dressed in silk. His hair was curled. His skin oiled. He was silent the whole time, too afraid to resist, too confused to fight. Then came the blade. Without warning, without mercy. The emperor had commanded it, and so it was done. Sporus was no longer a boy, but he was not a girl either. He was something new, created for the pleasure of one man's grief. When Nero saw him again, he smiled with satisfaction. "Now she is perfect," he said. "Now she will never leave me." The servants bowed. The guards looked away. And Sporus stood there, still and silent, clothed in a dead woman's memory. His voice was gone. His childhood, stolen. All he had now was the role forced upon him. Rome did not question. The emperor's will was law. And so began a performance more tragic than any Nero ever wrote. A boy lost his body. A woman was reborn. And the world turned, as if nothing had changed. The act was done. There was no ceremony, no warning, no comfort. Only the blade. Cold, fast, final. In one cut, Sporus was no longer a boy. What was taken from him could never return. His body was changed, and his life was no longer his own. He did not scream. He only stared at the ceiling, eyes wide, as if trying to leave his body behind. The pain came later, slow, deep, and sharp like a memory that would never fade. But no one asked how he felt. No one dared. Nero had spoken, and Rome obeyed. After the wound healed, the dressing began. Sporus was bathed in oils, wrapped in silk, and painted with soft colors. His eyebrows were shaped, his lips tinted red, and his hair brushed to shine. A long veil was placed over his face. Not to hide him, but to complete the illusion. He stood still as the palace women whispered instructions. "Smile gently," they said. "Walk slowly. Eyes down. You are a bride now." A bride. At 15. To the most feared man in the empire. Nero held a private wedding. There was no priest. No temple. Only witnesses who pretended not to watch. He placed a ring on Sporus's finger and kissed him as if he were Poppaea. "You are mine," he whispered. "You have always been mine." Afterward, Rome was silent. The streets murmured with shock, but no protest came. Who would question an emperor who could turn a boy into a queen? Sporus stood beside him in robes of gold and white, veiled and voiceless. The crowd bowed. No one smiled. The gods did not bless the union. The people did not celebrate it. But Nero smiled. And Sporus disappeared behind the veil forever. They called him empress, but not with honor. The name was whispered behind fans and closed doors. In public, no one dared speak it. But they all saw him, Sporus, the boy behind the veil. Always beside Nero. Dressed in silk. Decorated in gold. Wearing the rings and robes of Poppaea, the dead empress he had been forced to replace. He sat beside Nero at feasts, hands folded, lips silent. He was never asked to speak, and he never volunteered. When Nero performed poetry or music, Sporus clapped at the right time. When the emperor cried, Sporus leaned in to comfort him. When Nero kissed him, he closed his eyes and pretended it didn't hurt. The palace guards looked through him. The servants obeyed him. The court feared him, not for who he was, but for who loved him. To insult Sporus was to insult Nero's grief. And in Rome, that meant death. At night, Nero would lie beside him and whisper strange things. "You're her," he would say softly. "I see her when I look at you. The gods brought you back to me." Sporus never replied. He had learned not to. He let Nero believe the lie, because fighting it was useless. The people of Rome didn't understand what they were seeing, but they knew better than to ask. The senators stayed silent. The poets stopped writing. No one wanted to be the next body floating in the Tiber. And so Sporus remained, veiled, quiet, crowned in jewels, haunted by the man who claimed to love him. He lived in a palace made of fear. A puppet dressed like a queen. A boy forced to become the ghost of a woman he never knew. He was no longer a person. He was Nero's illusion made flesh. By day, Rome watched them. But by night, there were no costumes, no scripts, no audience. Only two figures behind heavy doors, one crowned in madness, the other cloaked in silence. In the quiet of their chamber, Nero would whisper, "My Poppaea." His voice soft, almost tender. As if the word itself could bring her back. Sporus used to flinch when he heard it. He used to shake his head, used to say, "I'm not her." But now, he said nothing. What would be the point? The lie had lived too long. It had become safer than truth. So Sporus let Nero hold him. Let the emperor bury his face into his chest, trembling. He let him cry and murmur and fall asleep with fingers still tangled in his hair. Some nights, Nero spoke of the past, memories twisted by guilt and fantasy. Other nights, he just wept, like a child afraid of his own dreams. And Sporus held him. Not because he loved him. Not because he forgave him. But because he didn't know what else to do. Love and fear had blurred. He couldn't find the edge between them anymore. Was Nero mourning? Or was he playing? Was this real grief, or just another scene in a play no one could leave? Sometimes, when Nero slept, Sporus would weep quietly. No sound. Just tears down painted cheeks. He didn't know who he was mourning, Poppaea, himself, or the boy he used to be. He had become a ghost inside his own skin. A name whispered behind doors. A person remembered only through someone else's obsession. And though he lived in the emperor's arms, it felt like being buried alive. Nero dreamed of love. Sporus survived it. And in that room, filled with silence and perfume, no one knew who grieved more. By day, Rome watched them. But by night, there were no costumes, no scripts, no audience. Only two figures behind heavy doors, one crowned in madness, the other cloaked in silence. In the quiet of their chamber, Nero would whisper, "My Poppaea." His voice soft, almost tender. As if the word itself could bring her back. Sporus used to flinch when he heard it. He used to shake his head, used to say, "I'm not her." But now, he said nothing. What would be the point? The lie had lived too long. It had become safer than truth. So Sporus let Nero hold him. Let the emperor bury his face into his chest, trembling. He let him cry and murmur and fall asleep with fingers still tangled in his hair. Some nights, Nero spoke of the past, memories twisted by guilt and fantasy. Other nights, he just wept, like a child afraid of his own dreams. And Sporus held him. Not because he loved him. Not because he forgave him. But because he didn't know what else to do. Love and fear had blurred. He couldn't find the edge between them anymore. Was Nero mourning? Or was he playing? Was this real grief, or just another scene in a play no one could leave? Sometimes, when Nero slept, Sporus would weep quietly. No sound. Just tears down painted cheeks. He didn't know who he was mourning, Poppaea, himself, or the boy he used to be. He had become a ghost inside his own skin. A name whispered behind doors. A person remembered only through someone else's obsession. And though he lived in the emperor's arms, it felt like being buried alive. Nero dreamed of love. Sporus survived it. And in that room, filled with silence and perfume, no one knew who grieved more. The fire had gone out. Nero, once god and an emperor, now crouched in the shadows of a ruined villa, hunted by the same city that once kissed his feet. No crown. No robes. Just dust, silence, and Sporus. The emperor was cornered. His guards had deserted him. The Senate had declared him a traitor. The people wanted blood. His enemies were closing in, soldiers, blades, and justice he could no longer escape. He raved. He sobbed. He clawed at the walls, speaking to ghosts only he could see. They hate me, he said. They never understood me. I gave them art. I gave them beauty. He held a blade, but his hand shook too much to use it. He turned to Sporus, voice trembling. Help me. Please. Sporus could not move. Could not speak. His hands, so long trained to serve, refused to lift the knife. Time stretched. And then, the hoofbeats came. Outside, death arrived dressed in armor. Panic surged. Nero clutched the dagger again. One last act. One final stage. What an artist dies in me, he whispered, tears sliding down his cheeks. Then steel met flesh. Blood bloomed like wine. A final breath. And silence. It was over. The emperor who played gods had died, a man afraid of pain. Sporus knelt beside the body. The face he once kissed was pale, lips parted as if still trying to sing. The madman was quiet now. No more scripts. No more applause. Only Sporus remained. Not a lover. Not a wife. Not a man. A ghost created by power, now left behind by it. He did not cry. There were no tears left. Rome would remember Nero. But Sporus? He would vanish into the margins, unwritten, unnamed. And sometimes, the loudest scream is the one no one hears. Rome buried Nero and kept his shadow. They didn't crown Sporus. They passed him. First came Emperor Otho, once a friend of Nero, now playing at empire. He took Sporus into his court, not out of love, but out of memory. A living piece of the fallen tyrant. A way to touch power once removed. Otho called him lady. Dressed him again in Papia's colors. Let him sit beside him in court. But there was no softness. Only show. Sporus had become a story told in silk. And then Otho fell. A knife to his own heart. One breath, then gone. Sporus was handed to Vitellius. This emperor laughed. He showed Sporus off like a broken jewel. A curiosity. A pet. Something to entertain his guests. Men whispered behind their goblets. They called Sporus Nero's ghost bride. They joked he still wept at night. He did not. He had learned how to disappear, even while being seen. In the palace halls, he walked like a shadow. The people looked through him, but he heard everything. Their jokes. Their cruelty. Their fear. Power passed from man to man, but none of them saw him. Not really. They only saw the echo of Nero's madness. Sporus remembered it all. The wedding veil. The screams. The perfume. The lies. No one asked him who he was before the blade. No one cared. They had turned him into a legend they could mock, a symbol they could parade, a name without a soul. But behind his painted face, Sporus was awake. Watching. Listening. Waiting. He had outlived gods. He had survived a theater of monsters. And in the quiet, he carried a truth none of them dared to speak. The empire changed faces. But its cruelty always looked the same. The emperor wanted laughter. Rome was cracking, bleeding from every edge, but Vitellius still craved spectacle. He ordered a wedding, not for love, but for sport. A cruel pageant. A parody. Sporus would be the bride. Again. The court cheered. The jest would be delicious. The boy who once married Nero, dressed once more in silk and shame, paraded before Rome's rotting elite like a living joke. The veil, the perfume, the forced vows, it would all return. This time not to flatter an emperor's grief, but to feed his hunger for power and laughter. Sporus said nothing. He listened, as he always had. But he was done being a stage. He stole a blade. A small one. Kept it beneath his robe. The same hands that once held Nero's trembling body now held steel. That night, alone in his chamber, he lit a single oil lamp. He wrapped himself in silk, combed his hair, and stared into polished bronze. He didn't cry. He didn't pray. He opened his skin with quiet grace. Not deep, but enough. Enough to decide. They found him before the wedding. Barely breathing. Pale, dressed in a bride's veil, his blood staining the floor like spilled perfume. There would be no celebration. Vitellius said nothing. Rome moved on. No tomb. No statue. No song. Just a boy erased by kings. Sporus had been a bride, a goddess, a pet, a shadow. Never asked who he was. Never allowed to become. And in the end, he chose the only name they hadn't given him, free. His silence was his scream. His refusal, his revenge. Not a man. Not a woman. Not Nero's ghost. Just a soul who refused the final costume. And for the first time, he did not perform. He vanished, on his own terms.